Most brides worry about the ring or the cake. Clara was worrying about the $50 million she had just saved her company. She stood in front of a floor-length mirror, white lace against her skin, the faint smell of honeysuckle drifting through the vineyard window. Her bridesmaids were laughing somewhere down the hall. The string quartet was warming up outside. For the first time in 10 months, everything felt still. Then came the knock. Not the florist, not the photographer. A man in a gray suit she had never seen before. He held a manila envelope with both hands, like it was something fragile or something dangerous. Clara Renner? She nodded, still holding her veil. He placed the envelope on the vanity table and walked away without another word. Inside was a termination notice. Effective immediately. Gross misconduct. Benefits canceled. Stock options forfeited. They didn't just fire her. They tried to delete her. But they forgot one thing. She kept the receipts. In the next few minutes, you will see how a decade of loyalty was traded for a calculated lie, and why the CEO showing up to her wedding ceremony was the single biggest mistake of his life. Stay till the end. Today's shout-out goes to someone who said something unbelievable in the last video. Before we go further, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. 10 years. That's how long Clara Renner had given to Meridian Global Logistics, a heavyweight freight company headquartered in Houston, Texas, moving billions of dollars worth of cargo across North America every single quarter. Clara wasn't just an employee. She was their lead auditor, the one they called when the numbers didn't add up, when a vendor submitted a suspicious invoice, when a regional office's budget looked just a little too clean. Her colleagues had a name for her. They called her the Iron Vault. Not because she was cold, but because nothing got past her and nothing she held ever leaked. She had earned that name the hard way. Late nights, skipped vacations, a drawer full of half-eaten energy bars and cold coffee cups she never finished. She believed in the work. She believed that the 4,000 families whose livelihoods depended on Meridian deserved someone watching the money with both eyes open. Then, on a Tuesday in October, 10 months before her wedding, her boss, CEO Richard Sterling, called her into his office at 11:47 p.m. That alone told her everything she needed to know. Sterling was a composed man. Silver-haired, tailored suits, never a word out of place. But that night, his hands were trembling. A glass of water sat untouched on his desk. "Clara, sit down." She sat. "We have a problem in California. A shipping irregularity triggered a federal penalty review. If the audit goes against us, we're looking at a $50 million fine. The kind that doesn't just hurt, it ends us. For 1,000 jobs. Gone." Clara felt the weight of that number settle in her chest. "Send me the files." She didn't go home that night, or the next. For 6 months, she lived inside spreadsheets and shipping logs, cross-referencing cargo manifests, carrier invoices, and port clearance records dating back 3 years. She missed her final wedding dress fitting. She skipped her bridal shower. She told Julian, her fiancé, "Just a little longer, I promise." Then she found it. Not a shipping error. Not a clerical mistake. A deliberate, structured diversion of funds, routed through a shell vendor registered in Nevada, siphoning money in amounts just small enough to avoid automated flags. She walked into Sterling's office and placed the file on his desk. I found the money, Sterling. But it's not where you said it would be. He looked at the file, then at her. His expression didn't break, but something behind his eyes shifted. Outstanding work, he said quietly. Take 2 weeks off, starting Saturday. Go get married, Clara. You've earned it. As she walked out of his office that Friday evening, she glanced back through the glass wall. Sterling was at the shredder, feeding papers in, one by one, fast. The vineyard outside Charlottesville, Virginia was exactly what Clara had dreamed of. Rolling hills, oak barrels lining the entrance path, morning light coming through in long, golden sheets. Her bridesmaids moved around her like a warm, familiar current, fixing her veil, adjusting her earrings, laughing about nothing in particular. For the first time in months, Clara exhaled. It was 9:14 a.m. on a Saturday. The ceremony was at noon. Then came the knock she would never forget. She expected the florist, or maybe the venue coordinator with a last-minute question about seating. Instead, a man in a dark blazer stood at the door, holding a large envelope. He confirmed her name, handed it over, and left before she could ask a single question. The room went quiet as she opened it. Dear Ms. Renner, this letter serves as formal notice of termination of your employment with Meridian Global Logistics, effective immediately, on grounds of gross misconduct. Your access to all company systems, benefits, and accrued stock options has been revoked accordingly. Clara read it twice, then a third time. Her maid of honor, Trish, reached for her arm. Clara, what is that? She didn't answer. She grabbed her phone and dialed her office extension. A recorded message played back. This number is no longer in service. She checked her bank app. Her direct deposit, the one that hit every other Friday without fail for a decade, showed zero. Account flagged. She called HR, voicemail. She called Sterling's direct line. It rang once, then went to an automated system she had never heard before. Then her stomach dropped. She pulled up the termination letter again and checked the signature date at the bottom. 30 days ago. They had signed her termination 30 days before she even finished the audit. While she was still working 18-hour days. While she was still believing she was saving 4,000 jobs. My wedding ring was on the table, she said later. But my career was already in the trash. She sat down on the edge of the bed, still in her gown, and opened her personal email to think. That's when the notification appeared at the top of her inbox. Security alert. Unauthorized remote access attempt detected on your personal cloud storage account. Multiple deletion requests initiated. Someone wasn't just firing her. Someone was trying to erase every file she had ever touched. Clara moved fast. She crossed the room, opened her personal laptop, and got a black screen. Her credentials had been wiped remotely. Every company-linked device she owned, locked. She thought about the months of work sitting on Meridian servers. The shipping logs, the Shell vendor records, the transfer receipts, all of it under her name. All of it now potentially gone, or worse, altered to tell a completely different story. But then she remembered something. 8 months ago, during a particularly brutal audit stretch, she had gotten paranoid. The kind of tired that makes you careful. She had created an encrypted backup, not on any company server, but on a personal external drive. And she hadn't kept it at her apartment. She had given it to the one person she trusted completely. Her mother, Beatrice. She called her. Mom, I need the drive. Right now. A pause. Baby, are you okay? What happened? I'll explain everything. Just bring it. Please. Now pause right here. If you were in Clara's position on your wedding morning, termination letter in hand, accounts frozen, someone remotely wiping your files, would you call off the wedding entirely to fight back? Or would you try to hold it together and smile for the guests? Drop fight or smile in the comments right now. I want to see where people stand. Beatrice arrived 22 minutes later, drive in hand. But when Clara opened the door, her mother's face wasn't calm. There was a black car, Beatrice said, her voice low. It followed me the entire way from my neighborhood. It's parked at the end of the venue lane right now. Clara took the drive, plugged it into her personal laptop, the one she bought herself, paid for in cash 3 years ago, and opened the backup folder. The audit files were there. Every record, every receipt. But there was a second folder she didn't remember naming. Project Phoenix. She clicked it open. It wasn't shipping records. It was a spreadsheet, 200 names. Meridian employees. Mostly senior staff, 10 to 30 years of service. Next to each name, pension account numbers, contribution histories, and beside those, withdrawal records. Recurring, quiet, devastating. The $50 million hadn't gone toward any fine. It had gone directly into a private offshore account registered under a name she didn't recognize, but the routing signature matched Sterling's internal authorization code exactly. Clara sat very still. Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly through the vineyard entrance. It wasn't the police. Julian found her in the bridal suite, laptop open, drive plugged in, wedding gown still on. He took one look at her face and closed the door behind him. Julian Marsh wasn't just a software consultant, which is what he told people at dinner parties. Before that, he had spent 6 years as a fraud investigator for a federal contractor in D.C. He knew how to read a room, and he knew how to read Clara. "Talk to me," he said. She showed him everything. The termination letter, the pension spreadsheet, Project Phoenix, the black SUV now idling at the edge of the property. He didn't panic. He sat down beside her, scrolled through the files with steady hands, and said 2 words, "We move." They had 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Guests were already seated. The string quartet had started. Her father was waiting at the end of the aisle. Julian pulled out his phone and made a quiet call, one she didn't fully hear. When he hung up, he looked at her. "We go through with it. Everything normal. But the reception gets a new program." Clara nodded. She understood. "Now, be honest with me in the comments. Was it wrong for Clara to pull Julian into this on what was supposed to be the first day of the rest of their lives together? Yes or a no? I genuinely want to know what you think." They walked out of the suite, and that's when she saw him. Richard Sterling, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, silver pocket square, holding a large wrapped gift, walking through the vineyard entrance like he had been personally invited. He smiled at a bridesmaid. He shook hands with an usher. He found a seat in the 3rd row, crossed one leg over the other, and looked completely at ease. Clara kept walking, eyes forward, chin level. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned. Her father walked her down. Julian's eyes never left hers. The officiant spoke about commitment, about choosing someone every single day. Then came the rings. As Clara slid the band onto Julian's finger, she felt a presence just over her left shoulder. Sterling had moved to the front row, and as she turned slightly, he leaned forward and whispered, quietly, evenly, like a man discussing the weather. "There's an NDA in the gift box. You sign it before you cut the cake, or I promise you, you won't walk out of this vineyard the same woman who walked in." Clara didn't flinch. She looked back at Julian and smiled. The I do's were done. The photographer captured the kiss. The guests applauded. Someone in the back row was already crying happy tears. But Clara's eyes moved to the far end of the reception tent, where the DJ had set up a large projection screen, typically used for the couple's photo slideshow. Julian had quietly spoken to the AV technician 20 minutes before the ceremony. Everything was ready. The reception began the way receptions always do. Chatter, clinking glasses, waitstaff moving between round tables with trays of sparkling cider and lemonade. Clara smiled through every hug, every congratulation, every "You look absolutely stunning." She watched Sterling from across the room. He was relaxed, confident, working the crowd like it was his event. Then he picked up a microphone from the bandstand. "I hope the happy couple will indulge me," he said, chuckling warmly. "I've known Clara for a decade, watched her grow into one of the sharpest minds I've ever had the privilege of working with." He raised his glass. "This toast is to Clara's next chapter, her well-deserved retirement from the corporate world." A few guests laughed politely, assuming it was a joke. Clara did not laugh. She caught Beatrice's eye across the room. Her mother gave a single, small nod and reached behind the DJ table. "Now, here's the moment I want you to sit with. If you were Clara, standing in your wedding dress, your own boss calling your firing a retirement in front of everyone you love, would you stay silent and protect the peace? Or would you speak up, regardless of the consequences? Comment your choice. I need to know." Sterling's gift box had been placed on the gift table near the entrance. During the cocktail hour, Julian had quietly opened it. Inside the decorative wrapping was a sealed NDA document, and beneath that, a small tracking device no bigger than a thumb drive. But the document underneath the NDA was the real shock, a pre-filled sworn statement, bearing Clara's name, confessing to the unauthorized access and theft of proprietary company data. They had planned to frame her. "He thought he was one step ahead," Clara said later. "He didn't know I was playing an entirely different game." Sterling was still holding the microphone, still smiling, clearly waiting for Clara to look rattled. Instead, she lifted her hand and gave Beatrice the signal. The projection screen behind the bandstand flickered. The wedding slideshow, photos of Clara and Julian through the years, blinked off. And in its place, sharp and clear and impossible to ignore, appeared a spreadsheet. Column by column, row by row, Richard Sterling's private offshore bank account statements. Transaction by transaction. Every number accounted for. The room went completely silent. Sterling's glass lowered slowly. And for the first time all day, the confident look on his face cracked, just slightly, at the corners. Nobody moved. Not the caterers. Not the bridesmaids. Not the elderly couple near the back who had driven up from Richmond that morning. Every single person in that reception tent was staring at the projection screen, at columns of numbers that had no business being on a wedding slideshow. Clara walked to the microphone. Calmly, the way she walked into boardrooms. The way she sat down in front of audits that other people were afraid to open. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply began to read. What you're looking at is a private offshore account registered under a shell entity called Vantage Meridian Holdings. Between January of last year and this past August, 43 wire transfers were processed through this account. The total amount moved $50.3 million. She clicked to the next slide. This money did not go toward any federal shipping penalty. There was no penalty. The penalty was manufactured internally to justify the movement of funds out of Meridian's operating accounts and into this one. A murmur moved through the room like a slow current. Sterling stood up from his seat. He looked toward the entrance of the tent, toward two men in dark jackets who had been standing near the perimeter all evening. He gave them a sharp nod. Neither man moved, because Julian was already standing beside the local sheriff, a broad-shouldered man named Deputy Holt who had been nursing a plate of food near the buffet table for the last 40 minutes, waiting for exactly this moment. Sterling's jaw tightened. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black device, rectangular, no bigger than a car key fob. "That's a kill switch," Julian said quietly, appearing at Clara's side. "For Meridian's primary server." Sterling held it up so Clara could see it clearly. "You stop this right now," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Or every file on that server, payroll, contracts, employee records, disappears in 30 seconds. Every one of those 4,000 jobs you care so much about, gone." The room held its breath. Clara looked at the device, then at Sterling. "That server has been in emergency backup mode since 6 a.m. this morning," she said. "Everything on it was mirrored to a federal secure drive at 7:15 a.m. Go ahead." Sterling didn't press it. She clicked to the next slide. The shipping irregularities in California weren't accounting errors either. The cargo being rerouted through those ports included unlicensed high-value microprocessors, classified export-controlled technology, moved under falsified freight codes. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was a federal trade violation. She set down the clicker and looked directly at Richard Sterling. "You told me I was a liability, Sterling." Her voice didn't waver. "I think what you meant was, I was your mirror." The slide that came next was the one that broke the room open. Project Phoenix. 200 names in clean, black type. Organized by department. By years of service. By the amount quietly drained from each of their retirement accounts over 14 months. And at least 60 of those names belonged to people sitting in that tent right now. Meridian had invited its top performers to the wedding. A detail Sterling had apparently not accounted for when he chose this particular Saturday to make his move. A man named Gerald, 26 years in Meridian's Texas Freight Division, stood up slowly from table 7. He squinted at the screen, found his own name, and sat back down without a word. His wife put her hand over his. Then Beatrice stood up. Clara's mother, quiet, composed, a retired accountant who spent 30 years reviewing numbers for a mid-sized firm in Austin, walked to the front of the room with her reading glasses still perched on her nose. "I want to say something," she said. Clara handed her the microphone. 7 months ago, my daughter showed me a set of transfer records she couldn't explain. I recognized the pattern immediately because I had seen something similar once before in a bankruptcy case I worked in 2003. She looked at Sterling without blinking. I told her to keep a copy of everything, and I kept a copy of my own. She reached into her jacket pocket and held up a small flash drive. This has the original discrepancy report, timestamped, unaltered, from before any company's server was touched. Now, I want you to stop and really feel this for a second. If you were sitting in that room, and you looked up at that screen and saw your name, your retirement, your 30 years of work, listed as a line item in someone else's fraud scheme, what would you do? Would you stay for the cake? Or would you demand justice on the spot? Comment cake or justice. Because what happened next depended entirely on the people in that room choosing one or the other. They chose justice. What Sterling had done went further than draining pension accounts. Using Meridian's HR database, he had taken out a series of high-interest predatory loans in the names of employees, mostly those closest to retirement age, using their social security numbers and direct deposit histories as collateral. The loan proceeds had been funneled directly into Vantage Meridian Holdings. These people hadn't just lost their savings. They had unknowingly been handed debt. A woman named Dorothy, 61 years old, 22 years in Meridian's accounting department, stood up from her table, walked across the dance floor, and picked up the slice of untouched wedding cake that had been placed in front of Sterling's seat. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she set the plate down at his feet. Sterling looked toward his security detail one more time. The two men in dark jackets glanced at each other, and then one of them said, quietly, to no one in particular, "We haven't been paid since last Thursday." They stepped aside. Richard Sterling stood alone in the center of the dance floor. The music had stopped. 3 vehicles pulled into the vineyard lane at 4:47 p.m. The first was a Virginia State Police cruiser. The second and third bore Maryland Federal Agency plates, part of a joint task force that had been building a parallel case for 11 weeks. They weren't there for the pension fraud. They weren't even there for the $50 million. The lead agent, a composed woman in a navy blazer named Special Agent Korea, walked directly to where Sterling was standing and presented the warrant. "Mr. Sterling, this arrest warrant relates to the fraudulent confession document bearing the name of Clara Renner, submitted electronically to Meridian's legal team at 8:03 this morning, and the coercion attempt made on these premises today." Sterling's eyes went to Clara. "She signed it. I have witnesses." "She didn't," Julian said, stepping forward. "She signed a consent to monitor authorization. It allowed federal agents to track your phone, your communications, and your physical location from the moment you arrived on this property today. Every word you said to her during the ring exchange was recorded." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Clara had ever heard. Then Julian looked at her, and in that look was something she hadn't expected. Not just love, an explanation. He had been the one, 11 months ago, who had quietly flagged an anomaly in Meridian's California shipping data to a federal contact. Not to expose Clara, to test whether the company's most trusted auditor would find it honestly or bury it. He needed to know, before he married her, exactly who she was when no one was watching. She had found it. She had reported it. She had worked herself to the bone over it. And that was all the answer he needed. "I didn't just save the company $50 million, Sterling," Clara said. "I saved it from you." 2 agents moved toward Sterling. The handcuffs clicked, a cold, clean sound against the background of a wedding playlist still drifting softly from the speakers. Somewhere outside, a bird was calling across the vineyard rows. Sterling didn't go quietly. As they walked him toward the vehicle, He turned back toward the tent and shouted a name, loud and sharp, aimed like something he'd been holding in reserve. A name nobody in that room recognized. But Agent Korea wrote it down immediately, because it wasn't Sterling who had built this. Sterling was the hand. Someone else was the architecture, and they were still out there. By 6 o'clock, the vineyard had taken on a different kind of quiet. Not the heavy, stunned silence of 3 hours ago. Something softer. Guests who had come for a wedding and stayed for something they would talk about for the rest of their lives moved slowly through the space, helping stack chairs, gathering centerpieces, checking on one another with the easy tenderness of people who had just been through something real together. Gerald from the Texas Freight Division found Clara near the gift table and shook her hand without saying anything. He didn't need to. His wife hugged her for a long time. Beatrice sat in a corner with 2 of the younger bridesmaids, calmly explaining what a fiduciary obligation was and why pension fund protections existed in the first place. As if she were teaching a class she had always been ready to give. At 6:22 p.m., Clara's phone rang. Meridian's board chairman. She let it ring twice before answering. He didn't waste time. The board had convened an emergency session. Sterling's employment was terminated. 3 board members had already submitted resignations, and they wanted Clara in the CEO chair by Monday morning. She stood at the edge of the vineyard, shoes off, feet in the grass, looking out at the last of the day's light moving across the hills. Julian walked up beside her. He didn't ask what the call was about. He waited. "They want me to take over," she said. He nodded. "What do you want?" She thought about the past 10 months. The 3 a.m. spreadsheets. The protein bars. The dress fitting she missed. The bridal shower she left early. She thought about Gerald's face when he saw his name on that screen. About Dorothy setting that cake plate down at Sterling's feet with 22 years of quiet dignity behind the gesture. "The most valuable thing I own," she said, "isn't stock options. It's my sleep." She declined the offer on Monday. What she didn't know yet, what her attorney called to tell her 2 weeks later, was that the $50 million, once properly traced and legally recovered, had been awarded through civil settlement directly to the affected employees. Every drained pension, every fraudulent loan, paid back, with interest, from Sterling's seized assets. 412 people got their futures returned to them. That evening, as the last guests were leaving and the string lights above the dance floor swayed in the late breeze, a vineyard staff member approached Clara with a bouquet. White roses, freshly cut. No card. No name. Tucked into the stems, folded once, a single $50 bill. She turned it over. Nothing written on it. No explanation. Julian looked at it, then at her. Neither of them had an answer. But somehow, it didn't feel threatening. It felt like a signal. Like someone, somewhere, was still watching, and for once, was on her side. They drove away from the vineyard just after 7. The road was quiet. Fields on both sides. The sky going deep orange and purple ahead of them. Clara's dress was folded in a bag in the back seat. She had changed into jeans and a light jacket somewhere between the federal agents leaving and the last guest hugging her goodbye. Julian drove. She looked out the window, and she thought about everything she used to believe. She had believed that if you showed up, truly showed up, with your whole life, your whole self, a company would see that and honor it. She had believed that a decade of proof was worth something. That 3 a.m. was a language corporations understood and rewarded. She had learned the hard way that it wasn't. Not because hard work is worthless, but because loyalty given without discernment is not virtue, it's vulnerability. And there are people in positions of power who are very, very good at finding it and using it until there's nothing left. Here is what nobody tells you about the workplace. Every company operates under something called a fiduciary duty, a legal and ethical obligation to act in the best interest of its stakeholders, which includes its employees. When leadership violates that, when they drain pension funds, fabricate liabilities, and weaponize the trust of the people who built the company from the ground up, they aren't just breaking the law. They are breaking a fundamental human contract. Clara understood that now. Not from a textbook, from a termination notice handed to her in a wedding dress. She started a whistleblower advocacy organization with Julian 4 months later. No investors, no corporate backing, just the two of them, a small office in Richmond, and a phone line that rang more than they expected from the very first week. Now, I have to ask you directly. Was what Clara did justified? Or did she go too far by making it public the way she did, at her own wedding, in front of everyone? Comment yes or a no. I am pinning the most honest, most thoughtful take I find. And if any part of this story moved you, hit like, and tell me in the comments which moment crossed the line for you. Because I read every single one. The people who try to erase you are counting on your silence. They are counting on you being too afraid, too tired, or too uncertain of yourself to speak. What they never account for is the person who has already made peace with the cost of telling the truth. Clara lost her job on her wedding day. She gained everything else. I spent 10 years saving that company, she said, months later, in the first interview she ever gave. But in the end, I was the one who was saved. Today's shout out goes to @LegacyKeeper62, who dropped this in the comments of our last video. They can fire you from a job, but they can't fire you from your integrity. That one stayed with me. If you want to be featured next, leave your most honest, most real reaction below. We read them all, and we will see you in the next one.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.